let's get to the news. This is interesting, actually, and let's talk about this. I'm not as qualified as you are to discuss this matter, so it's good that I'm reading this news item. The UN Commission on the Status of Women unanimously decided to choose Saudi Arabia to chair the 69th session of the Commission during the year 2025. The Commission is on the status of women. Ambassador Dr. Abdulaziz Al Wasl would be the first ever permanent representative of Saudi Arabia to chair this committee since its establishment in 1946.
So I have a lot of thoughts. My first reaction to this so just a little bit of background. Al Wasl took up his post as ambassador and permanent representative of Saudi Arabia to the UN in July 2022, after serving as ambassador and permanent representative to the UN at Geneva since November 2016. So he's been Saudi's representative in the UN for some time. The Commission on the Status of Women first met at Lake Success, New York, in February 1947, soon after the founding of the United Nations. So this is, again, it's an old commission. The United Nations have been talking about the status of women for many years. I think the reason that this is a really important topic to talk about is because there's been so much speculation about the corruption in the UN and how could they possibly give this to Saudi Arabia, the country that is so oppressive to women, et cetera, which is kind of an old soundbite now, to be completely honest. Every time I hear people really attacking Saudi for where women are quoting very old stats, and they're also looking at a historical version of Saudi that has progressed so much in a short amount of time, which means people maybe not able to follow as closely as, we follow it, knowing more about the country and living through it. But I also think that the reason it's important to acknowledge this as a positive step is to give credit where credit's due. I mean, there have been several reports on how Saudi has moved the furthest away from where it was in the past and progressed the most compared to other countries because they've put in so much effort to improve the status of women within the kingdom. And that's not just elite women, that is across the board. It's looking at social welfare policies. It's looking at the women's ability to access their own kind of legal support, legal representation. It's family law, family status law. It is work, and it is training and education, and so many other things. And giving the United Nations giving Saudi Arabia the opportunity to kind of chair this session, I think is actually encouraging them to keep going and encouraging other countries that need to make progress to follow suit. If you put in effort, you then can be a voice at the table where you need all the countries that need to improve women's status. They need to be there together. And just the last point on this, I know we've gone on for a little bit, but this is clearly a topic that's very close to my heart. My last point on this is that I think the reason it is important is because you have challenges globally, and you might attack one country that you think looks very clearly negative from the outside, but we have gender pay gaps globally. We have issues with women not being able to access certain healthcare in all countries of the world, including the United States. There are issues with women around the world that we need to address. So we should not be throwing stones if we live in glass houses, is my final note on that. And that's it.
Those were all great points, but I think it's time now for me, an American man, an American male, to comment on this matter. That is excellent. I want to echo kind of a sentiment that you made earlier, and I think it speaks to a broader theory or idea that we're doing with this podcast, which is Saudi Arabia is changing very quickly. We should be encouraging that change as it is change in a direction that the West wants to see in pretty much every way. Diversification away from oil, like advancement of women, diversifying economy, like opening up culture and creating a place to visit. I mean, there's so much good happening out of Saudi Arabia right now. So for the media and for those in the West who have an antiquated version or an Orientalist version about what's happening in Saudi Arabia, it's like, wouldn't you like to see these positive changes happening? And if you do want to see them happening, like, why don't you encourage them? Why don't you give Saudi Arabia a chance? Like, this is a huge opportunity. And, I mean, the United States, women did not vote at the very beginning, and only until 120 years ago, something like that, women got the right to vote. That's less than half of our total history. Women were not allowed to vote. So for us to stand on our sort of
Yeah.
soapbox and say, like, come on, yeah, like, I'm all for this. I think this is really cool.
You had countries in Europe where women weren't allowed to vote until the 70s. So, I mean, honestly, I think it's really frustrating that people are constantly attacking Saudi for the status of women. I think there are other things that we should be focusing on, especially now since there's been so much progress. But I will pivot now and talk a little bit about something completely different, moving to Aramco and looking at Saudi Aramco's appetite to invest and partner with China. So there's been news on Saudi Aramco's appetite to do this. Speaking at a development forum held in Beijing, Amina Nasser expressed the aim to become a partner in the Asian giant's economic journey. And Nasser highlighted strong opportunities for cooperation between Saudi Aramco and Chinese partners in sectors aimed at reducing emissions.
Yeah, the Saudi China kind of warm up that's been happening is concerning to me a little bit as a full American. It's like I'm getting a little jealous of China, I guess you could say. They're brokering this Iran deal, they're coming to Saudi, they're talking about new visa statuses. But this is interesting because Aramco is still very much huge, and pretty much the way that they're diversifying their investments as a company kind of always will be, because they're doing a lot of stuff in venture. They're branching out from oil. But Al Nasser said, so quote, "So I believe both our strategic goals in chemicals are well aligned, and we are already seeing Aramco's action on the ground. There were 2 agreements last year for multi-billion-dollar liquids to chemicals investments in China." And he added, "One is our acquisition of an interest in Rongsheng Petrochemicals Company," I bet that's a good logo, "and Zhejiang province for $3.4 billion. The other is our partnership in Liaoning province." I love reading these, at a cost of approximately $12 billion. $12 billion, it's a lot. Anyway, there's a lot. Saudi China is now a thing, and I'm just going to have to live with my jealousy.
Yeah, I mean, there's this discussion about the pivot to China, right? And are we pivoting? And I think it's really important to note that the historical relationship between Saudi and the United States is probably going to remain strong. And, Saudi has definitely come out and expressed this multiple times. I think the world is, an interesting sea of opportunities. And therefore, I believe that Saudi is looking for opportunities where it makes sense. But I don't think that, they're going to forget their old friends.
Inshallah, I hope not. I think it's more like they're just kind of, instead of having a one-way bilateral, like, strong relationship, they're just a little more open, to.
And I think that's healthy
Sure,
when it comes to countries.
Yeah, totally. Just a little jealous. That's okay. Tennis, anyone. Riyadh, I can't believe this is an amazing story. Riyadh will host the next 3 editions of the World Tennis Association finals from 2024 to 2026, following the announcement Thursday of a new agreement between the WTA and the Saudi Tennis Federation. This has been in the works for months. The 2024 season-ending finals will take place between November 2nd and 9th, featuring the top 8 singles players and doubles teams in the race to the WTA finals.
Exciting. So, I mean, tennis there was some controversy not so long ago, early this year, actually, when, the ambassador to the United States, Princess Rima bint Bender, said she was deeply hurt by an article that was published in the Washington Post in which the former tennis stars, Evert and what's the last name? The other one,
Navratilova, Martina. Yeah.
So, yes, they criticized the Women's Tennis Association for wanting to hold WTA finals in Saudi. And again, it went back to that question of women's rights, women's kind of participation in societies and in sports. I don't think that Saudi necessarily needs to host every final. It's exciting when we do, but I do think that we shouldn't be unfairly attacked for things when things have been progressing. But yeah, I think, basically they selected Riyadh in the end anyway. And there was a quote: following a comprehensive evaluation process over several months, which has included assessment of multiple bids from different regions and engagement with players, all prospective hosts were considered against a clear set of criteria. So Riyadh won fair and square according to them. But it'll be exciting to host it in Saudi, I think.
Speaking of winning fair and square, do you know who won the University of Virginia intramural tennis championship in 2007? You're talking to him, baby.
Really?
Any chance I get to mention that? Yes. It wasn't
well
my
done.
main sport. Thank you so much.
Do you have a big trophy?
They gave me a T-shirt, which I still have and can't wear anymore because it's like I want to keep it, so it's like I don't want it falling apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, just the taste of victory is enough for me, honestly.
You weren't even able to borrow the trophy for a year before they had to give it to the next winner?
Thing is that glory is not something that is tangible. Like, you can have a million trophies, but just knowing that you dominated your opponents.
Okay.
Intrepid launches a women-led tour in Saudi Arabia. This is really, again, this is cool because the way this is setting up is that I'm talking about women and then you're talking a lot more knowledgeably about women. Intrepid Travel has announced a women's-only tour in Saudi Arabia led by women for women. Sounds like discrimination to me. The tour represents.
You sound like a Saudi guy now.
The white male has long been disadvantaged. The tour represents an effort to sidestep the luxury-focused travel industry in the country while giving travelers a more authentic experience and supporting the booming female labor force. Over to you, Hannah.
Well, there's a quote, right? This shift has been one positive effect, which is that it gave more rights to women, said Zina bin Sheikh, the managing director of EMEA for Intrepid Travel. This tour effectively means that we can speak to women and we can meet women who own businesses, women guides, women who run restaurants, etc. So I think, and then just to finalize, the 12-day adventure will bring travelers to female-owned establishments. I think the beauty of traveling this way is to focus on the hosts, not just the travelers, says bin Sheikh. I think what's interesting is you can do that without having it have to be a female-led tour for women only. But every time I talk to women that visit Saudi, they always tell me all we do is go to Riyadh and all we do is meet with people that we know from outside the kingdom. So I do think there's this fear of speaking to women. You think that they're untouchable. You're not allowed to go and meet women, business owners or people you're not allowed to have a chat. So maybe this is a good way to kind of push both sides of the tour to talk to each other and start learning about, kind of common day-to-day experiences that they all have. I don't know. I think it's a good thing. I think that we need to lift this kind of mystery veil and let people just meet other women inside Saudi Arabia.
I just like to be invited to stuff, so
No, I agree, and I do think that everything is better when there is diversity, which is why I think it's really important to get women involved in the economy to begin with. I'm not saying anybody should be replacing anybody else. There is no zero-sum game here. So I'm not 100% on board with exclusive women-only things. But I do think that because of the way the culture is set up, and some women still are incredibly conservative and don't want to interact with other men, this is the way to get those women more involved in tourism. So it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, when I'm in Saudi Arabia, I don't want to hang out with expats because I just am not into that at all. We talked about this probably off the air, but when I'm there, I don't people are like, oh, my friend's also in Saudi and he's from London. You guys should hang out. It's why? Because we're both not from here. I'm not here for that. So it's interesting. I think it's kind of a cool story. This is the type of thing that you're seeing in a society that's increasingly including women more and more. You start to get things like this. That's why I think it's kind of interesting to both of us. It's a little bit of a latest data point that things like this are going down,
I mean, I do have a friend who visited from Australia a couple months ago, and I did introduce her to my cousin, sort of like cousin's wife, who is half Australian, half Saudi. So I did feel like I needed her to meet the other Australian. Maybe I should be more sensitive to your sentiment of like, you don't want to meet all the other Americans. You'd rather meet the Saudis. So
I
um,
exclusively hang out. I hung out with one dude from London, but my fraternity brother was like, "You got to meet him. He's great." And I was like, I mean, and he was great. We did hang out. We went to my favorite restaurant there, Blue Garden. But a little shout out to Blue Garden, by the way. But and he loved it. But I was just like, usually I'm just like, where are my Saudis at? You know, because it's
yeah.
I love Saudis. Anyway,
But you've been to Saudi a lot, right? So this was my friend's first visit to Saudi ever. I'm the only Saudi she's ever known, and I wanted her to feel like there were, I introduced her to lots of other Saudis, but I did feel, and they really actually did hit it off, the two Australian girls. So anyway, Dolce and Gabbana leans into Saudi. So to further its Middle East expansion, Dolce & Gabbana has unveiled its strategy for Saudi Arabia and will open up a new flagship store located at the luxury destination Via Real. Um, D&G will also be entering a formal partnership with Diriyah Company, the Saudi state-owned organization responsible for the restoration, redevelopment, and management of the historic Diriyah area in Riyadh, which I know you're a big fan of.
huge fan of Doria and Big Bang Terrace. Dolce, huh? So this is cool because there's a quote that the CEO said. I'm going to get to that in a second. But they were the first, really, they claim. This was a press release. Whenever I read these, I'm like, I usually go really in detail to the way things are phrased because PR people love to throw in those words that are like, well, that's not factual. But they claim to be the first international fashion brand, to stage a fashion show in the Gulf region after the pandemic, which they did at the very best place in Saudi Arabia, Al Ala. Not the very well. I mean, it's pretty terrific, but it's on brand for them. It's pretty cool. Yeah. This is a quote from the company's CEO, Alfonso Dolce. Great name. Saudi Arabia is a country to which we have always looked with keen interest for its entrepreneurial and economic dynamism. Dynamism. Why is that a hard word to say? Can you say it? Dynamism. Dynamism.
Dynamism? Dynamism.
Jeez.
I think
Okay.
you were putting the emphasis on the wrong
emphasis on the
syllable.
wrong syllable.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. As well as its years, I'm really destroying this, as well as its ancient culture. For years, we have been present in this country, initially approaching the market with caution and respect, deepening our understanding of its history and social aspects. To this day, we can say the Saudi market is very interesting, reacts positively to incentives, and is open to new proposals. I don't know, like if this was a translated thing, but they're just like, it was kind of a refreshing, just like, this is a very honest, interesting quote from this dude. Caution and respect is probably how more people should be approaching this market.
It sounds very Italian to me, honestly. I do think it was translated from Italian. There's a lot of superfluous language, but I think it's exciting, and Saudis love their brands, so this is good.
Do you like Dolce and Gabbana? What do they do? They like luxury, like handbags and stuff and shoes, right?
And
They're just a
clothes
luxury
and
clothes.
and
Okay.
yeah, more, I would say clothes and bags, definitely. Do I? Yeah, I mean, I'm Saudi. I like all I like all designer brands. I can't help it. It's like this is, and I'm probably like a moderate consumer of luxury brands. Like I don't, it's but compared to people here in like where I live in London, I definitely, yeah. I mean, it's more than the average person for sure. So
there was a lot in there. We're gonna need to pull back some layers on that. Okay, but
no,
we will
this
do
is
that
good. Let's
over.
just move along.
No. Hold on a second. Wait 1 second. Can you give me like a very informal ranking of like Dolce, Gucci, like give me a top like few that do Saudis have a unique perspective on like what's cooler? Like I would say, so just as some context, I would say that like Saudis think certain cars are cooler in Saudi Arabia than they might be considered here. Like for example, like Toyota, which I now have like a huge like appreciation for and respect for, and Lexus, because they dominate in Saudi. are not as cool here
Yeah.
as Mercedes or whatever. I don't know. But is there like something like that for fashion? Like, is Dolce at the top, or is it like, I don't know the other brand names.
A couple years ago, there was like there was a really big kind of Dolce like summer collection with really big patterns. Like that was pretty big. So yeah, it can be big, and then you'll see people using it. Is there a ranking? It's cyclical. It's not always the same brands, definitely. I would say at the moment, some of the trendier brands are Loewe, which is a Spanish brand, but actually has like a German name. But anyway, people often mispronounce it. It's spelled Loewe. So that one's pretty big. Celine's big, right? There's also like Louis Vuitton's classic. People always want to carry Louis Vuitton. Chanel is super classic. Everybody wants to wear like Chanel shoes. There's a specific kind of shoe almost everybody wears. I don't know. I'm just going to throw out more brands, but there was, I watched a great Instagram kind of clip of somebody doing a street survey of, can you recognize these brands? And they, somewhere, I think in Europe, I think they were in Italy, maybe in France, and they found two Saudi girls. Like, obviously they got every single one.
It, yeah.
It's unfortunate, but it is definitely something that we're not very bad at.
I think that for our next we got to put a bow in it there and tie up this episode, which is unfortunate because I would love to just go for another full hour grilling you on brands as a Saudi woman, as an expert in the field. But we will put a bow in it there and talk next time. Our next deep dive and all of the news items will be on fashion, so I can actually learn something about this subject.
No.
But we forgot to do it this episode, which is we're just getting started here. We're building out something massive. We talked about the IPO already, but we kind of have to get back to our roots, and we need to in every episode. I'm sorry that I have to remind you, but you need to teach me an Arabic word. So what do you got for your board?
So the word today is a word I think is fun to say, and I hope that you think so too. Mustahil.
Mustahil.
Yeah. So it is fun to say, isn't it? Mustahil.
Oh, okay. Mustahil.
It
okay.
just,
what does it mean?
It just means impossible.
So what?
But it's used in conversation a lot. Like if you're talking and somebody tells you something that's surprising, you could just be like, Mustahil. No way.
No way.
Mustahil.
Okay. So, and this is, I've got a separate little list here of the words you're teaching me. And as everybody knows, we're going to do one for every episode so that by the time we do IPO this podcast, I will also have 190 or 390 Arabic words that I know very well.
Excellent.
Mustahil, and the one before, which means like no way or impossible.
It means no way. It means impossible. But yeah, it can be used in casual conversation quite a bit. And so that's a good word to use to throw out if somebody says something shocking to you. Mustahil.
Okay. Mustahil. Okay, cool. And do you remember your first word was like, sorry, I got a separate list. It's not on my show notes, though, but I'm going to have them here ready to go.
Adi. My first word was almost the opposite of mustahil, which is adi, which is like, yeah, whatever, kind of, which means it's normal or it's just that, right? So
Adi and mustahil. Okay,
Adi.
2 words. Look, this is edifying for everybody, listeners and hosts, so that's great. Hannah, thank you.
Thank you.